I should have seen it coming the first. Thank you. And Richard's mother, Patricia, looked me up and down at our engagement party and said, "Well, I suppose she'll do." She said it like I was a piece of furniture Richard had picked out at a discount store, functional, but not quite what she had hoped for. Richard laughed it off, squeezed my hand, and whispered that his mom just had a particular sense of humor. I wanted to believe Hyen. I really did. The thing about marrying into the Montgomery family was that everything came with an invisible price tag. Not the kind you could see or prepare for, but the kind that made itself known in small, cutting moments, like when Patricia would introduce me to her friends as Richard's wife without ever using my name, or when Richard's father, Gerald, would interrupt me mid-sentence at dinner parties to redirect the conversation to literally anyone else. They never said outright that I wasn't good enough. They just made sure I felt it in every interaction, every forced smile, every backhanded compliment disguised as concern. "You're looking tired, dear. Are you getting enough sleep?" Patricia would ask at family gatherings, her eyes scanning my face like she was documenting evidence of my inadequacy. "Perhaps you should try that eye cream I mentioned. The one from that boutique in Manhattan, though I suppose it is rather expensive. I'm a middle school teacher. I've been teaching English and creative writing for 7 years, and I love what I do." But to Patricia and Gerald, my career was something to be pitied, not celebrated. They owned a successful commercial real estate company, and in their world, anyone who worked in public service was either a saint or a failure. I definitely wasn't being treated like a saint. Richard worked for his parents' company, had joined right after college, and somewhere along the way, their approval became the compass by which he navigated every decision. When we were dating, I found his dedication to family admirable. After we got married, I realized it wasn't dedication, it was dependence. Not financial dependence, but something deeper. Something that made Hyen unable to see when they crossed lines I didn't even know could be crossed. The first year of our marriage was a masterclass in biting my tongue. Patricia had opinions about our apartment, so cozy, our furniture quite eclectic, and especially about my cooking. She'd show up unannounced with Tupperware containers of food just to help out because she knew how exhausting my job must be. Never mind that I'd spent 3 hours the night before making a pot roast from scratch. Never mind that Richard had told her repeatedly we didn't need her help. "She means well," Richard would say every single "thank you" when I tried to talk to Hyen about it. That's just how she shows love. But it didn't feel like love. It felt like surveillance. Like I was being constantly monitored for signs of failure, and every misstep was carefully cataloged for future reference. Gerald was different but equally difficult. He was the type of man who believed his success gave Hyen the right to hold court on any subject, whether he knew anything about it or not. He'd lecture me about real-world skills and how teaching was noble work, but not particularly practical in terms of building wealth. When I mentioned that I was working on getting my master's degree in education policy, he patted my shoulder and said, "Good for you, sweetheart. Everyone needs a hobby." A hobby. My career. My passion. The thing I woke up excited to do every morning despite the early hours, and the mountains of paperwork, and the reality that it'd probably never be financially comfortable. He reduced it to a hobby. I started dreading family dinners. Every Sunday evening, we'd drive to their sprawling house in Westchester, and it'd spend 3 hours navigating a minefield of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled criticisms. Richard would sit there, oblivious or unwilling to intervene, while his parents dissected every aspect of our lives. "Are you two thinking about buying a house soon?" Patricia would ask, knowing full well we'd just signed a new lease on our apartment. "It's just that all of Richard's friends are settling down properly. The Hendersons just bought that lovely colonial in Scarsdale, and the Winters family, their daughter married that wonderful surgeon they're building custom in Greenwich." The subtext was always clear. You're holding Richard back. He could have done better. He should have done better. But here's what really started eating at me. Richard's complete inability to defend me or set boundaries. He'd change the subject or make excuses, but he never once said, "Mom, that's enough," or "Dad, you're being disrespectful." Never once did he stand up and say, "This is my wife, and I won't sit here while you belittle her." I started noticing how his parents would text Hyen constantly throughout the day. Questions about work, requests for dinner, comments about things they'd seen that reminded them of Hyen. Normal parent stuff, maybe, except for the frequency and the expectation of an immediate response. If Richard didn't reply within an hour, Patricia would call. If he didn't answer, she'd call me. Is Richard okay? He hasn't responded to my text about Thursday dinner. He's teaching a training session. Patricia. He'll respond when he can. Oh, well, you should remind Hyen that family comes first, dear. The word dear was her weapon of choice. She could make it sound like an endearment and an insult in the same breath. Things escalated about 18 months into our marriage. We'd been trying to save money for a down payment on a real house, not the starter home Patricia kept suggesting we settle for. He'd taken on tutoring sessions 3 evenings a week, and Richard had been working longer hours to build up his position in the company. We were exhausted but motivated. We had a plan. Then Patricia called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was remating essays during my lunch period when my phone lit up with her name. My stomach clenched. She only called me directly when she wanted something Richard might say no to. Hello, Patricia. Hello, dear. How are you? Not too overwhelmed with work, I hope? There was that edge in her voice, that implication that I was always on the verge of falling apart. I'm fine. What can I do for you? Well, Gerald and I have been talking, and we've decided it's thank you and we took a proper family vacation. Somewhere tropical. We're thinking about a week in Turks and Caicos. There's this absolutely divine resort 5-star. Adults only. Very exclusive. I waited for her to get to the point, pin hovering over a student's essay about perseverance. We'd love for you and Richard to join us, of course. It's been ages since we've all spent quality thank you in together. Quality thank you in. The phrase almost made me laugh. Quality thank you in the Montgomery family meant watching Gerald drink scotch and monologue about real estate trends, while Patricia critiqued everything from my posture to my choice of sandals. That's kind of you to think of us, I said carefully, but we're really focused on saving right now. Maybe another thank you in. Oh, don't be silly. This is a family investment. Gerald always says you have to make thank you in for the people who matter. There it was. The implication that if I said no, I was declaring that family didn't matter to me. Patricia, I really appreciate the invitation, but the dates are already set. 2nd week of June. I'll send you the resort information. You should see the villas, dear. They're absolutely stunning. Your students will still be there when you get back. And she hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, fury rising in my chest. She'd just decided, made plans, chosen dates, probably already booked accommodations, all without actually asking if we could afford it or even wanted to go. When I told Richard that evening, I expected Hyen to be as frustrated as I was. Instead, he just sighed. She mentioned it to me last week, he admitted. I was hoping she'd let it go. You knew? And you didn't tell me? I didn't want to worry you. I figured I'd handle it. Handle it how? Richard? She called me today and basically told me we're going. She didn't ask. She informed. That's just how she is. She gets excited about things and runs with it. I'll talk to her. But I knew he wouldn't. Or, if he did, it would be a soft suggestion that she'd bulldoze right over. Because that's how every conflict with his parents ended. With Richard trying to keep the peace and me left feeling unheard and dismissed. The resort Patricia chose cost $600 per night. The villa shed selected for the family had 3 bedrooms and came with a private pool and dedicated concierge service. When she sent me the listing, I felt physically ill. A week there would cost more than our rent for 3 months. I called Richard at work. Something I never did unless it was an emergency. Did you see what your mother sent? The resort? Yeah. It looks nice. Nice? Richard, it's $4,200 for the week. Just for the villa. That doesn't include food or activities, or I'm sure they're not expecting us to pay for everything. They're not expecting us to pay for anything. They're expecting us to pay for everything. There was a long pause. I could hear office sounds in the background, phones ringing, someone laughing, the hum of corporate life. They wouldn't do that, Richard said finally. They invited us. They'll cover it. Did they say that? Explicitly? Another pause. He'll clarify with them. He didn't clarify. Or if he did, he never told me the result. Instead, Patricia started texting me daily with planning updates. Restaurant reservations shed made for the Ramup. Spa treatments shed booked for us girls. A deep-sea fishing excursion for the men. Every message came with links and prices that made my chest tight with anxiety. 2 weeks before the trip, I was getting my hair cut when Patricia called. I almost didn't answer, but I knew she'd just keep calling until I did. I'm at the salon, I answered, hoping she'd keep it brief. Oh, perfect. Listen, I just finalized the dinner reservations for the week. We have the most amazing lineup, that French place on the beach, the sushi restaurant everyone raves about, and on our last night, there's a chef's table experience that's supposed to be absolutely transcendent. Patricia, now, I've been thinking about gifts for the staff. We should probably budget around $500 for tips and ramatuities throughout the week. Maybe you and Richard can handle that? Well, take care of the villa costs. My hairdresser caught my eye in the mirror. I must have looked stricken. I need to talk to Richard about our budget, I managed. Budget? Darling, this is a vacation. You can't pinch pennies on a vacation. That's the whole point, to relax and indulge. We're saving for a house. Oh, houses will always be there. Memories are what matter. Besides, Gerald and I won't be around forever, and we want to spend thank you in with our son while we can. The guilt trip was delivered with perfect precision, wrapped in sweetness and concern. After I hung up, my hairdresser, Vanessa, who'd been cutting my hair for 3 years and heard more than her share of my in-law stories, put down her scissors. You're not seriously going on this trip, are you? Richard wants to. Richard wants his parents to be happy. What do you want? I didn't have an answer. Or I did, but I was too scared to say it out loud. I wanted to not go. I wanted to tell Patricia that we couldn't afford it and wouldn't be pressured into spending money we didn't have on a vacation we didn't want. I wanted Richard to tell his parents, once and for all, that their expectations were unreasonable. But I also didn't want to be the villain. I didn't want to be the wife who kept Richard from his family, who was too rigid, too focused on money, too unwilling to invest in family relationships. That night, Richard came home with takeout from my favorite Thai place. He knew I was upset, and this was his way of softening me up. We need to talk about this trip, I said before he could even set down the food. I know, and am handling it. What does that mean? Because your mother called me today with a tipping budget of $500. That's on top of whatever else she's expecting us to pay for. Richard started unpacking the food, avoiding eye contact. I told them we'd contribute what we could, what we can. Richard, what we can afford is $0. We're trying to save. It's 1 week. 1 week in 3 years of marriage. They're not asking us to buy them a car. They want to spend thank you in with us at a $600 a night resort with daily activities that cost more than my weekly Ramasri budget. So what do you want me to do? He finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen before: resentment. Tell them no? Tell my parents that my wife won't let me go on a family vacation? That's not fair. I'm not the bad guy here. Then why does it feel like I have to choose between you and them? The question hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Because that was the real issue, wasn't it? Richard had spent his entire life seeking his parents' approval, and now that he had a wife, he wanted mine too. But when those two things conflicted, he didn't know how to reconcile them. So he just didn't. He avoided and deflected and hoped everything would work out. I went to bed Anrami that night, and the next night, and the night after that. We barely spoke except about logistics, who was doing laundry, when the Ramasri delivery was coming, what thank you and he'd be home. The trip loomed over us like a storm cloud, ramming darker and more ominous as June approached. 3 days before we were supposed to leave, Patricia sent a Ramup text to me, Richard, and Gerald. It was a detailed itinerary with costs itemized next to each activity. At the bottom, Shed added a note. R and S can cover Thursday and Friday dinners plus activities. Well, handle Monday, Wednesday in the villa. Sound good? Thursday and Friday dinners plus activities. I did the math in my head. She was asking us for at least $2,000, probably more. I felt like I was suffocating. I screenshotted the text and sent it to Richard with a simple message. Are you seeing this? He called me immediately. Don't respond yet. I'm coming home. We need to talk. When he walked through the door, an hour later, he looked exhausted. We sat on the couch, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. I didn't know she was going to send that, he said finally. But you knew they expected us to pay for part of it. I thought maybe, I don't know. I thought it would be manageable. $2,000 is not manageable. Richard, that's a quarter of our savings. That's months of me tutoring after work until I'm too tired to think. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're more worried about disappointing your parents than about us. About our future, our goals. He put his head in his hands. They're my parents, and I'm your wife. I know that. Then act like it. Set a boundary. Tell them we can't afford this. Tell them that we appreciate the invitation, but that we need to prioritize our own financial goals. Tell them something other than just going along with whatever they want. And if they get upset, then they get upset. They're adults. They'll survive. But I could see it in his face. The fear of their disappointment was rameter than his fear of mine. Because he knew I'd forgive Hyen eventually. I always had. His parents? They held ramages. They withdrew affection like currency. And Richard couldn't handle that. "I'll talk to them," he said quietly. "I'll tell them we can't do the full amount. Maybe we can cover one dinner and call it even." It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. But I was so tired of fighting, and I could see that Richard was barely holding himself together. So I nodded, and I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this thank you would be different. It wasn't. The conversation Richard had with his parents must have gone poorly, because the next morning, Patricia called me directly. Not Richard. Me. "Good morning, dear. Do you have a moment?" I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, trying to prep for a parent-teacher conference later that day. "I'm about to leave for work." "Patricia, what's up?" I wanted to clear the air about this silly money situation. "Gerald and I are not trying to burden you too financially. We just thought it would be nice to split costs like a normal family vacation." It's not a normal family vacation when the accommodations cost $600 a night. There was a sharp intake of breath. "Well, I suppose we have different definitions of normal. When Gerald and I take vacations with his parents, we always contribute our fair share. It's what respectful adults do." The implication was clear. I was being disrespectful. I was being cheap. I was being difficult. "Richard and I have financial goals we're working toward," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "We've been transparent about that. If you wanted us to contribute significantly, you should have discussed it with us before booking anything." I did discuss it with Richard. He seemed perfectly fine with the arrangement. And there it was. The wedge. The way she constantly played me and Richard against each other, making me seem like the unreasonable one. The one who was holding Hyen back from being a good son. "Patricia, with all due respect, we can't afford what you're asking. We'll have to sit this one out." "Sit this one out?" Her voice went cold. "It's a family vacation. You don't just sit out family." Then maybe family shouldn't make financial demands without considering everyone's circumstances. The silence that followed was glacial. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had that clipped quality that meant it'd crossed a line from which there was no return. "I see. Well, they'll let you get to work then. Give my love to your students. I'm sure they appreciate having a teacher who's so principled about money." She hung up before I could respond. My hands were shaking. I'd done it. I'd finally stood up to her. And it felt terrible. Richard called me during lunch, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "What did you say to my mother?" I told her we couldn't afford the trip. She called me crying. Crying. She said you told her we don't consider them family. That's not what I said. And you know it. Do I? Because she's pretty upset, and now my dad's involved. And they're saying maybe we should take some space from family gatherings if money is going to be an issue. I almost laughed. Almost. Because the absurdity was overwhelming. So, because we can't afford to spend thousands of dollars on their vacation, they're threatening to cut us off? They're hurt. You made them feel like their company isn't worth the money. Their company has spent 3 years making me feel inadequate. I'm not going to bankrupt us to prove I'm worthy of their approval. No one's asking you to bankrupt us. Yes, they are. $2,000 might not sound like much to your parents, but it's huge for us. And I'm not going to apologize for having financial boundaries. Richard was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They're my parents. I know. I can't lose them." And that's when I realized Richard wasn't choosing between me and his parents. Had already chosen them. Had always chosen them. I was just the wife he hoped would eventually conform to their expectations. Had swallow her pride and her boundaries and her self-respect to keep the peace. We didn't go on the vacation. Richard went alone. He tried to convince me up until the night before, saying it would look bad if I wasn't there, that his parents would use it as ammunition for years to come. He wasn't wrong about that last part. But I was done. Done pretending that their behavior was acceptable. Done apologizing for having reasonable financial boundaries. Done being treated like an accessory to Richard's real life, the one that revolved around making Patricia and Gerald happy. The week Richard was gone was the loneliest of my life. but it was also clarifying. I spent the evenings walking through our neighborhood, looking at the homes we'd been saving for, imagining a life where we didn't have to justify every financial decision to people who saw our dreams as less important than their whyans. I called my sister, Jade, one night and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of her many gifts. "What do you need?" she asked when I finally finished. "I need to know if I'm being unreasonable, if I'm being too rigid about money, if I'm—" "Stop. You're not unreasonable. You're married to someone who won't stand up for you. That's different." She was right. The problem wasn't the money. It was never about the money. It was about respect. It was about Richard choosing his parents' comfort over my dignity, over and over, until I was exhausted from trying to make myself smaller, quieter, easier. When Richard came home from Turks and Caicos, tan and smiling in photos his mother had posted all over social media without me, of course. So it looked like Richard had gone alone, playing into whatever narrative she was spinning for her friends. I had already made some decisions. We needed counseling. Either Richard learned to set boundaries with his parents, or I was done. Not done with the marriage necessarily, but done with the relationship. As it existed, me bending, high implicating, his parents controlling. He resisted at first. "We can work this out ourselves," he said. "We don't need a stranger telling us how to communicate." "We do, actually. Because the way we communicate now isn't working. I tell you I'm hurt, and you tell me your parents didn't mean it. That's not communication. That's dismissal." It took 3 more fights and one night where I slept at Jade's house before Richard aired me to couples therapy. Our counselor, Dr. Rebecca Foster, was patient and direct in equal measure. She didn't let Richard hide behind excuses, and she didn't let me collapse into resentment without examining my part in the dynamic. "You've taught high-end that you'll always forgive high-end," Dr. Foster told me during one session. "And Richard, you've taught her that your parents' approval matters more than her comfort. Neither of you is happy with this dynamic, but you're both maintaining it." It was painful, hearing the truth laid out so plainly. But it was necessary. Richard started, slowly, to see what he'd been experiencing. How his parents used money and guilt and family obligation to control not just high-end, but our marriage. How his inability to say no to them meant I had to be the bad guy, the one who wasn't fun or flexible or family-oriented. It didn't change overnight. Richard still struggled with the idea that loving his parents didn't mean obeying them, that he could be a good son without sacrificing his marriage, but he started trying. He told his mother she couldn't just drop by unannounced anymore. He told his father to stop commenting on my career. And when they pushed back, which they did, loudly and with dramatic wounded feelings, Richard didn't immediately cave. The vacation incident became a turning point, not because it was the worst thing his parents had ever done, but because it was so blatant in its manipulation. They'd wanted us to fund their luxury vacation, and when I'd said no, they tried to punish us for having boundaries. 6 months after the Turks and Caicos disaster, we had our first holiday season where I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. Richard told his parents we'd be splitting holidays between both our families. Patricia was furious. Gerald called it disrespectful to family tradition. But Richard held firm. And for the first thank you in our marriage, I felt like he was actually my partner. Not their son who happened to be married to me, but my husband, my teammate. We did eventually buy that house. It took another year, but we did it. And you know what? Patricia and Gerald didn't help. They'd offered before, always with strings attached, always with the implied debt of gratitude we'd owe them. But by the thank you we were ready. We didn't want their help. We wanted something that was ours, built on our terms, with our money and our sweat and our compromise. Looking back, I don't think Patricia ever really saw me as part of the family. I was an obstacle, a barrier between her and her son. And maybe, in some ways, I was. Not because I wanted to separate them, but because I wanted Richard to have a life that wasn't dictated by their approval. The vacation they expected me to fund ended up costing them something far more valuable than money. It cost them the unquestioned access to Richard they'd always taken for granted. It cost them the power to make demands without consequences. And honestly, I don't feel guilty about that. Not anymore. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to participate in someone else's dysfunction. Even when that someone is family, especially when that someone is family.